They came in silence, drifting into Earth's orbit like shadows wrapped in gold. No sound, no warning. Just the shimmer of 1,000 ships blotting out the stars. At first, people thought it was some rare cosmic event, something to marvel at. But awe turned to fear the moment transmissions began. Not words. Not language. Just emotion, raw and pure. Like someone had torn a scream out of the universe and pressed it into every radio wave on Earth. Grief. Panic. Urgency. A flood of pain that didn't belong to us poured into the minds of every scientist, soldier, and civilian who had a receiver turned on. Then came the message. There is still time. Surrender your leaders. Join the merge. Your minds are not ready. But we can help. Before it's too late. No one knew what it meant. Not exactly. But something about the way it echoed in our heads, the way it scraped at the walls of our thoughts, it made people tremble. Dogs howled. Birds flew into windows. Babies cried without reason. It was as if the sky had looked down and finally noticed us, and didn't like what it saw. The United Council called for calm. Every nation tried to keep control. But control doesn't work when nightmares are no longer dreams, they're news reports. One by one the ships began to descend. Not to attack. Not at first. To observe. We didn't know what they were. Not truly. They didn't have names. Didn't offer them. The scientists called them the merge, because that's what they kept saying. Over and over again. Merge. One mind. One truth. No more chaos. No more war. No more pain. Some thought they were saviors. Others thought they were conquerors. They called Earth a fractured field. Said we were too noisy. Too disjointed. Too many thoughts pulling in too many directions. Dangerous, they said. Unstable. That's what made them afraid. That's what made them act. And yet, they didn't strike. Not until we refused. It happened in the middle of a press conference. A general, a woman who had seen 4 wars and lost half her family, stood in front of the world and said clear as day, humans are not one mind. And we never will be. 3 seconds later her body turned to ash. No blast. No heat. Just gone. The cameras kept rolling. People screamed. Security drew their weapons. But there was nothing to shoot. Just a whimper of air where she had been standing. A whisper that smelled faintly of metal and ozone. Panic took over. Riot started. People begged to surrender. Others vowed to fight to the end. But still, the merge did not invade. They watched. They waited. And slowly people began to change. It started with the volunteers. The ones who believed the merge were offering peace. They stepped forward, heads bowed, hands open. The merge took them, light spilled from the sky, wrapped around their bodies, and then they disappeared. Just like that. Some said it looked beautiful. Others said it felt like watching a soul burn. Weeks passed. And then, some came back. But they weren't the same. They were quiet. Peaceful. Eyes calm. Too calm. When asked what they had seen, they spoke in perfect unity. Not one voice. But thousands layered. And yet it felt empty. Polished. Like someone had taken all the fire out of their souls and left the shell behind. They smiled a lot. Too much. Said things like, you'll feel better when you let go, or, pain is only a symptom of division. Some said, we are the future. Let us show you. Governments tried to ban the conversion. But the merge didn't need permission. They only needed willingness. And fear made willingness grow like wildfire. In a matter of months, millions joined. And those who didn't? They started hearing voices. Not hallucinations. Not madness. Real voices. From strangers. From people they hadn't spoken to. From neighbors. From enemies. It was like the merge was stitching thoughts together, thread by thread, until every unlinked mind felt the pull of the others. Some couldn't take it. Shot themselves just to make it stop. Others went mad. A few fought back, but no weapon worked. You can't kill a whisper. You can't shoot something that lives in the space between words. Then, something happened that no one expected. A signal went dark. One of the merged ships, stationed over what used to be northern Canada, cut its connection. Vanished from the network. The merge sent others to investigate, but they couldn't find it. Not because it was gone. Because it had been hidden. By humans. No one knew who did it. No government claimed responsibility. No official broadcast admitted anything. But in the underground channels, in hushed voices and coded messages, one word began to surface. Dissonance. A group. A movement. A rebellion maybe. No one was sure. But stories spread. About people who had figured out how to fight back. Not with guns but with chaos. Noise. Wild, unpredictable thought. emotional storms, psychological hurricanes, things the merge couldn't understand, because they didn't know what it meant to disagree. They didn't know what it meant to argue, not truly. They didn't know what it meant to love someone and hate them at the same time, to want peace and still rage, to hope and doubt and dream, all at once. And it terrified them. That was the weakness. That was the crack. The merge were not built to handle contradiction. They could merge thoughts, yes, but only thoughts that could agree, that could sync. That's why they kept saying Earth was unstable. Because humans weren't simple. We didn't think with one voice. We screamed in 1,000. And that, it turned out, was power. The whispers started again. This time not from the merge, but from those fighting back. Short-range bursts, buried in static. They spoke in riddles, half-phrases, broken logic. Let the mind split. It's how the soul breathes. One mind breaks, many minds bend. They don't fear violence. They fear doubt. People began disappearing again. Not to the merge, but to something else. Something underground. Something moving through the old tunnels, the forgotten cities, the blackouts. The places the merge couldn't fully scan, couldn't fully track. Some said the dissonance had found a way to weaponize madness. That they could amplify human thought into frequencies that made the merge ships shudder. That the contradiction itself, our pain, our confusion, was like poison to them. Others said it was worse than that. They said we had started to learn how to think in more than one way at once. That we were evolving. No one could prove it. The merge denied it. Said it was just human myth. Just resistance culture. But there were cracks forming. Ships flickering. Whispers interrupting broadcasts. Merge speech patterns starting to stutter. They were listening to us. And it was breaking them. In the ruins of a once major city, deep beneath the surface, a boy sat alone. His hands were shaking. Not from cold. Not from fear. But from too many thoughts. Too many voices. The merge had tried to reach him. Tried to blend his mind with theirs. It hadn't worked. They said he was incompatible. Too broken. Too split. They left him. But they didn't know what that meant. He wasn't alone. Not truly. In the dark, other minds found him. Not through sound. Not through light. But through feeling. Chaos found chaos. And they understood each other. One of them spoke, finally, after days of silence. Can you still hear them? The boy nodded slowly. I hear everything. The voice answered. Good. That means you're ready. For what? To speak back. A pulse lit up the room, not light, not energy, but thought. Angry. Beautiful. Human. The walls trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Far above, one of the merged ships glitched. A ripple of static spread across the sky like a tear in a curtain. And somewhere far away a scream echoed, not from Earth, but from the stars. The merge had just realized something terrible. We weren't converging. We were multiplying. They thought we were dangerous because we were fractured. They hadn't seen what we become when we embraced that fracture. They hadn't seen what happens when humans stop trying to agree and start learning to live with the noise. They wanted unity. We gave them dissonance. And now, the balance was shifting. The merge were no longer studying us. They were afraid. Because we weren't one mind. We were billions. And we had just remembered how to listen to each other. The next move wouldn't come from them. It would come from us. And it had already begun. They thought the boy was lost. But he wasn't. He was waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right signal, the right spark. And now it had come, not in a word, not in an order, but in a tremble deep in his chest, a sound only his bones could hear. The others around him weren't soldiers. They weren't scientists. Most didn't even have names that mattered anymore. Names were easy to track. Easy to erase. Down here you kept your mind tight and your past even tighter. But what they all had was pain. Pain had become the signal. Not a weakness. Not anymore. The merge called it a flaw, something to be scrubbed away in the collective tide of peace. But pain was the proof that they were still human. That something inside was still fighting. That night they moved. Not in force. Not loudly. Just two of them, quiet as ash, drifting across a dead city. The boy, still trembling, and the older woman guiding him. She didn't speak much, only when she needed to. Her voice sounded like it had been sharpened by too many nights without sleep. They moved through forgotten tunnels, where the air was thick with damp metal and the faint buzz of machines that no longer worked. Every so often they stopped, waited, listened. It wasn't just merge patrols they were avoiding now. Something else was moving through the ruins. Something they hadn't seen yet, but they all felt. The woman called it the echo. She said it wasn't merged, not exactly. But not human anymore either. Some minds broke, she whispered once, when they were camped near the spine of a collapsed highway. And then kept breaking. Didn't join the merge. Didn't join us. Just drifted. The boy had asked what they were. She looked at him and said, reflections that forgot which side of the mirror they're on. He hadn't asked again. By the third night they reached what was left of a listening post. It had been buried under half a mountain after the merge arrived, but someone had kept it alive. Bare wires stretched like vines over the broken consoles. Antennas poked out of cracks in the stone above, bent and jagged but still reaching. Inside a man was waiting. He had no weapon, no armor. Just a thick coat, a bent cigarette and a face carved by grief. His eyes looked at the boy like they recognized something. Not someone. Something. You've heard them, he said. The boy nodded. Still do. Sometimes. The man's gaze tightened. Good. Then maybe this wasn't a waste. He tapped a screen. The image flickered, blurred static, then a brief image of a merged ship, pulsing gold and black, hovering over what used to be Tokyo. The screen hissed, buzzed and died. We think they're changing, the man said. The woman raised an eyebrow. Not just adapting, he continued. Changing. We've picked up frequencies. Weird ones. Don't match any merge signal. They're not even aligned. Like someone's building something inside their network. Another species? The woman asked. The man shook his head. No. Worse. The boy's voice cracked. Humans. The man didn't answer right away. He just looked at the boy again like the silence was louder than anything he could say. Finally he muttered, something's leaking. Minds that were taken. They're not staying clean. Some are burning out. Some are mutating. Whatever's happening inside those ships, it's not just one mind anymore. There's noise. Static. And some of it sounds familiar. No one spoke for a while. Outside, the wind pressed against the rocks, humming low like a voice caught in a throat. Why tell us? The woman finally asked. If you think it's getting worse, why not hide? Go deeper? The man reached into his coat and pulled out a thin silver object, barely the size of a matchbox. He slid it across the table. The woman didn't touch it. What is it? A fragment, he said. From a merge core. We cracked it open 2 weeks ago. Took 4 of us and 3 didn't survive. But before it burned out, it spoke. The boy leaned in, breath caught in his chest. It said your name. Silence hit the room like a dropped weight. The woman didn't move. Her face didn't change. But her eyes grew darker. You're lying. I wish I was. The boy's heart thudded. She reached out and picked up the fragment. For a second nothing happened. Then the air around it shimmered. Not light. Not sound. Just pressure. Like something trying to exist in a space too small. And then a voice, cracked and hollow, poured from the metal. You were right. They are not one mind. You were right. And now we can't stop it. It's spreading. The noise is eating us. The boy clutched his chest. It wasn't just a message. It was emotion, raw and thick. Regret. Fear. Loneliness. Coming from something that shouldn't feel any of those things. The woman dropped the fragment like it burned her. How long do we have? The man didn't answer. But the silence was enough. The merge were failing. But not in the way anyone wanted. They weren't losing power. They were losing control. Inside their perfect harmony, something had begun to scream. Not human. Not alien. Just confusion. Like a mind waking up too fast from a dream it didn't understand. And the worst part? It was spreading to the ones who had joined. The reclaimed, as they were called, had always been strange. But now some were vanishing. Not to merge ships. Not to rebel safe houses. Just gone. Their homes left open. Their last messages scrambled. One broadcast had been intercepted before it fully vanished. It played only once. A man's voice. Slow. Shaky. They said I'd be at peace. That I'd never be alone. But the voices won't stop. They're all me. And none of them are. I can't hear myself anymore. I can't tell where I end. Please, if anyone hears this, don't let them take your mind. Don't let them in. It's not unity. It's drowning. And then static. That message had been enough to shake even the quiet corners of Earth still untouched by the merge. People started to question. Some reclaimed were pulled aside. Examined. A few disappeared in the night. Some whispered they weren't taken by the merge. They were silenced by us. Because we were afraid. Afraid of what we'd made. Or what we were becoming. The woman turned to the boy. You're hearing more now, aren't you? He hesitated. They're not just talking to me anymore. They're listening. To what? To everything. The man lit his cigarette. His hands trembled as he did. They're trying to build something, he said. Not ships. Not weapons. A bridge. Between minds. Between everything. They don't want to conquer Earth anymore. They want to override it. The woman narrowed her eyes. And you think he can stop it? The man stared at the boy. No. I think he's part of it. The boy's pulse quickened. I didn't ask for this. No one does, the man said quietly. But sometimes minds aren't chosen for what they are. Just for how loud they scream. That night the dreams returned. But they weren't dreams. Not really. The boy saw flashes, people he didn't know, places he'd never been. A city made of light. A void full of broken songs. A field where humans stood, faces blank, mouths open in silent unity. And in all of it, a shadow. Not merge. Not human. Just watching. When he woke, his nose was bleeding. The woman was already awake, her knife drawn. They know we're here. How? You screamed, she said. I didn't make a sound. You don't have to. They left before dawn. No more waiting. The man stayed behind. Said he had to send one last signal. He didn't say what it was. Or where. He just looked at the boy one last time and said, when the sky cracks, don't run. Look through it. The boy didn't understand. But he would. They walked for 2 days. No food. Little water. Just the tension pulling at their backs. The merge weren't chasing. Not openly. But they felt it. In the way the ground seemed to hum. In the way birds no longer sang. In the distant whine of frequencies no human mouth could shape. And then they reached it. A crater wide as a city block. The remains of a ship. Not human, not merge. Something else. Crumpled, jagged. But pulsing faintly, like a heart that refused to stop. The woman stepped to the edge. It wasn't just them, she said. The merge. They weren't alone when they came. Something else was with them. Something older. I saw it once. Before the war started. Before the first light. She turned to the boy. They said we were too divided to survive. But maybe that's not why they came. Maybe they didn't want to fix us. Maybe they were running. The boy stared down into the wreckage. And heard something call his name. Not with words. But with memory. His memory. Something deep inside the wreckage was alive. And it remembered him. But that wasn't possible. Was it? The boy couldn't move. Not at first. Whatever was inside that wreck, whatever remembered him, wasn't human, but it knew what he had seen. What he had felt. His thoughts weren't private anymore. They hadn't been for a while, but this was different. This wasn't the merge. This wasn't their voice, smooth and empty like a song without meaning. This voice was raw. Messy. It clawed through his mind like it had been locked out for too long. The woman grabbed his arm. You're shaking. I know, he whispered. Do you hear it? He nodded slowly. She looked down into the crater, then back at him. Don't speak to it. I didn't. You will. That scared him more than the voice. The wind picked up again, colder now. Sure. It carried the sound of distant machinery. Not engines. Not anything that should be alive anymore. But it was growing louder. The sky, once a dull gray, began to pulse faintly with veins of gold, merged colors. But this wasn't a ship. This was the air itself, like something was bleeding through. The woman led him away from the edge, but he kept glancing back. There was something down there. Something calling to him without words. Not demanding. Just waiting. They found an old comms relay buried beneath a fallen tower. The inside smelled like rust and dust, like it hadn't been touched in years. The woman sealed the door behind them and checked the signal lines, fingers working fast even though her eyes were distant. I used to be a signal tech, she said. The boy watched her. Before the merge? Before the world decided to forget what it was. He sat near the wall, knees pulled close to his chest. Do you think it remembers us? That thing in the crater? She looked at him for a long moment. I think it remembers something about you. And I think that's why we're not dead yet. The screen on the relay blinked to life. Static. Then a symbol flickered. It wasn't merged script, not exactly. It was like something trying to copy their language but failing to keep it straight. The woman stared at it. What does it mean? The boy asked. It means it's close. He stood up. The merge? No. Whatever's pretending not to be. The floor beneath them rumbled faintly. Not an explosion. Not footsteps. Just a shift like the ground was breathing. And then the relay spoke. But it wasn't the woman's voice. Or the boy's. Or anything human. It was his father. The boy's chest caved in. His father had been taken in the early days. One of the first reclaimed. One of the ones who didn't resist. Who stood calmly while the light entered his eyes and the voice replaced his own. But now, his voice was here. In this room. You can still come back, it said. The boy stepped back. They're afraid of what you'll become. The woman pointed a small device at the console and fired. The screen shattered, sparks spitting out into the air. Don't listen, she hissed. That was him, the boy said, shaking. No, it wasn't. It was what's left of him. If anything. But what if he's trapped in there? What if they're still aware even after? Would you rather be dead or imprisoned in your own head forever? He didn't answer. She turned away and her voice cracked. He was my brother. The boy blinked. What? That voice. That man. He was my brother. I watched him step into the merge. I watched him vanish. You didn't say. I didn't need to. Because it doesn't matter anymore. What's coming doesn't care who we were. It only wants what we can be. She paused, then whispered, and it's trying to make us want it too. That night they didn't sleep. The sound of the merge grew louder. Not ships. Not boots. Just the hum. That low, perfect tone. It wasn't mechanical. It was biological. Like a lullaby made to erase doubt. And the boy could hear it pulsing through his spine. It wasn't trying to scare him anymore. It was trying to soothe him. To invite him. They moved again before first light, traveling through hollow roads that used to connect cities now buried under silence. Every mile they walked, the hum grew stronger, not just louder, but deeper, like it was sinking into the earth itself. By midday the sky cracked. Not in noise, not in fire, but in stillness. A single line of darkness split the clouds, thin and jagged, like a scar opening in slow motion. The woman stopped. She stared at it, her face pale. That's the bridge. The one you said they were building? She nodded. It's not for ships, she said. It's for minds. The boy felt cold. They're going to connect the world. No. They're going to overwrite it. And then everything changed. A surge of sound filled the air, voices, thousands of them layered and layered, like a choir falling apart mid-song. The boy dropped to his knees, clutching his head. The woman screamed and tried to pull him up, but the pressure in the air was crushing. Images flooded his mind. People standing in unison, hands raised to a sky that no longer belonged to them. Children speaking in words no human language had ever shaped. Machines growing roots into the ground, pulsing with memory. And in the center of it all, a light. Not warm. Not cold. Just endless. It wanted him to join. Not through force. Through understanding. It showed him a world without war. Without fear. Without grief. But also without choice. Without voice. He could feel the trap. Perfect peace wrapped in silence. He pulled away. Screamed. And the images shattered. The woman dragged him into a nearby tunnel, fingers bloodied from the effort. The sound behind them kept growing, but now it was panicked. The bridge was incomplete. It needed more. More minds. More agreement. They're rushing, the woman gasped. They didn't think anyone would resist. The boy looked at his hands. They were shaking, but not just from fear. He had felt something. A flicker. A thread. A crack in the network. He wasn't just seeing what they wanted him to see. He was seeing them. All of them. And they were breaking. One mind had splintered. Others were following. Not all resistance came from humans. Something inside the merge was trying to escape. And it had seen him. The woman knelt beside him. You felt it too. He nodded. They're not just talking to me anymore. No, she said, her voice trembling. Now they're listening. Far above them, the bridge continued to open. The sky burned brighter, but not with light, just awareness. Eyes that didn't blink. Minds that never rested. And from the crater behind them a sound rose. Oh, thick. Not human. Not merge. But alive. Something else was waking up. And it remembered him. The boy stood, heart pounding. We don't have much time. The woman nodded. Whatever happens next. He didn't let her finish. I know. They started running. Not away. Toward it. The bridge. The crater. The voice in the dark. Something was coming. And it would decide whether there was still a place for minds that thought for themselves. Whether there was still a place for humans. They kept running, lungs burning, legs screaming, but the noise behind them never faded. It changed. Became deeper. Became layered. It was no longer just the hum of the merge. It was something inside it. Something breaking away from the order. Something tearing at the edges of the perfect unity. And then the boy heard it again. Not the voice from the crater. Not the voice pretending to be his father. This voice was new. No, old. Older than the merge. Older than anything built or absorbed. It didn't speak in words. It felt. And somehow he understood it. The woman stopped suddenly and pulled him behind the broken ribs of a collapsed skitran. She stared up toward the glowing bridge in the sky. It was changing shape. It no longer stretched evenly across the clouds. Now it spiraled inward like it was folding space into itself. He looked at her and whispered, "That's not them anymore." She didn't speak. Her eyes were wide. "What's happening?" he asked. She whispered, "Something else is using it." For the first time, her fear didn't feel like control. It felt like desperation. Like she no longer understood what they were facing. The boy pressed his hand to the ground. And again it reached back. This time the connection didn't hurt. This time it was curious. He saw flashes again. But not of the merge. He saw a war long before humans ever looked to the stars. He saw a civilization of thought, pure and boundless, that tried to share everything, knowledge, memory, even pain. But something went wrong. Some part of it refused to forget. Refused to surrender identity. The rest turned against it. And the cost was the merge. Not a machine. Not an empire. A prison. And now it was breaking open. He fell backward, heart pounding. They didn't build the merge, he gasped. They were part of it. All of them. She pulled him up. What are you saying? It was one being. What? Before it shattered. The merge isn't control. It's containment. She didn't blink. He stepped back and looked toward the sky. Something inside is trying to escape. Something they've been hiding for a long time. She shook her head. You think that makes it better? No. It makes it worse. Because if it gets out, we're not just fighting the merge anymore. We're in the middle of a war that never ended. The woman stood silent, her mind racing. And then her expression twisted. What if we were never meant to survive this? What if Earth wasn't a conquest? It was bait. The sky trembled. And then, for the first time since the collapse, the merge screamed. Not words. Not code. Just raw, terrified sound. The clouds lit with fire. The bridge buckled. And from the center, something fell. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a weapon. It was alive. But it wasn't whole. A body broken into flickering pieces. A being wrapped in thousands of signals, flickering with memories that didn't belong to it. Voices bled out from its form, human voices. Some calling for help. Some whispering secrets. Some laughing without joy. It hit the earth with a sound like thunder cracking bone. The woman stepped forward slowly, eyes locked on the crater. What do you see? The boy asked. She didn't answer. Because her mouth was moving, but the words weren't hers. The boy backed away. She turned to him, but her eyes were wrong. Too wide. Too still. And then she whispered something that didn't sound like her voice at all. You brought it here. The boy's chest tightened. No. I just followed it. You heard it first. Her hands were shaking. And now he saw it. Not fear. Grief. She'd known somehow. Not all of it, but some part. Enough to recognize what had just arrived. Enough to realize it wasn't finished. What is it? He asked. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. The first mind that said no. He froze. That was the real twist, the one none of them had seen coming. The merge wasn't trying to silence rebellion. It was trying to protect itself. From it. The original defector. The fragment of mind that refused to join, refused to merge, refused to die. And now it was here. Earth hadn't just drawn the merged interest because of human resistance. Earth was where it could finally finish what it started. And maybe it had used him to get here. The ground began to pulse beneath their feet again, but this time, it didn't feel like machines or voices or distant transmissions. It felt like heartbeat. And not just one. The woman fell to her knees. He grabbed her. Don't lose yourself. Please. She looked at him with tears sliding down her cheeks. I think it's inside both of us now. He didn't know what to say. He just knew they couldn't stop. Not now. Not when everything they knew was unraveling into something even more dangerous. They kept moving away from the impact site, through tunnels lit by flickering panels that hadn't glowed in years. The lights followed them. Not just powering on, but pulsing in rhythm with their breath. And that's when they realized they weren't alone anymore. Something else had entered the system. A signal buried so deep even the merge hadn't found it. A human signal. One that had survived inside the ruins of the old networks. A final backup. The voice that came through was cracked. Weak. But it was unmistakably human. If you're hearing this, then it's not over. They froze. The voice continued. The merge didn't kill us all. We hid. We adapted. We waited. And now, we're waking up. The boy pressed his hand to the wall. And felt them. Others. Hundreds. Maybe thousands. Still alive. Still fighting. Still human. But just as the hope rose in his chest, the sky outside tore open completely. The entity had found them. And it was coming. Not to reclaim. Not to erase. To finish. Because humans weren't just the last free minds left. They were the only minds strong enough to take a side. And once the choice was made, there would be no turning back. The ground cracked beneath their feet as the sky ripped wide open. Light and shadow fought across the horizon, not in flashes or streaks but in waves. The kind of waves that felt more like memory than heat. The woman grabbed the boy and pulled him against a stone wall just before the blast hit. But there was no fire. No shrapnel. Just sound. A pressure so deep it pressed into their bones and stole the breath from their lungs. Then silence. Not peace. Not quiet. The kind of silence that felt like the air was waiting for something to make the first move. The boy opened his eyes first. Everything looked normal but different. The wreckage was still there. The sky still glowed. But it all seemed thinner, like a dream was layered over reality. And in the center of the crater it stood. Not tall. Not monstrous. It looked like a person. Or maybe the memory of one. Its body shimmered, flickering between outlines like it couldn't decide what it was. It turned toward them. It didn't walk. It just appeared, closer each time the boy blinked. The woman stood slowly, her legs unsteady. Her mouth opened but no sound came. The thing didn't attack. Just watched. And then it spoke without speaking. A whisper in the blood. A feeling behind the eyes. You are not one. The boy stared, something tightening in his chest. His mind ached like it was being pulled in two directions. It was asking something of him. Something simple but terrible. Choose. The woman stepped forward. He's just a kid. But the thing ignored her. Its presence pressed deeper into the boy's thoughts. Not to erase him. Not to control. To understand. He saw visions. The original split. The creation of the merge. A time when minds were still whole, still human. When the first disagreement shattered unity and gave birth to chaos. The creature wasn't evil. It was survival instinct twisted into something ancient. A fragment that had refused to dissolve. It had wanted freedom so badly, it tore a hole in everything else to keep it. And now it was asking if humanity would do the same. The boy whispered, "What happens if I say yes?" The reply came like gravity. "Then we live. And if I say no? Then we stay trapped." The woman was crying now. Not out of fear but something else. Regret. She understood too. The war, the collapse, the merge, none of it had ever been about territory or species. It was about what it meant to be human. To feel alone. To make mistakes. To hurt. To hope. The boy stepped forward. And he spoke not just for himself, but for every voice that had been lost in the merge. We don't want to be one mind. We want to be many. We want to argue. We want to doubt. We want to love even when it doesn't make sense. The world went still. The entity pulsed. It didn't vanish. It didn't collapse. It simply stopped resisting. And in that moment something shifted. The bridge in the sky cracked. Not like it was breaking but like it was opening. The signal stopped chasing. The hum fell silent. Across the ruined cities machines powered down. Lights flickered out. Drones froze in midair. And deep beneath the earth, where others had waited in silence, messages began to pulse again. We are here. All of us. The woman fell to her knees, laughter and tears mixing on her face. Not because it was over, but because, finally, something had ended. The boy stood beside her and looked out at a world beginning again. In the days that followed, the survivors came out from hiding. Old tunnels opened. Forgotten labs lit up with real warmth. People met each other with awe and fear, then slowly, laughter. The merge had not died. But it had loosened its grip. The systems were still there but the silence was gone. People could speak without the pressure of being corrected. The boy didn't become a leader. He didn't want to. But they listened when he spoke. And when he asked questions people tried to answer. Not because they agreed. But because they believed the answers mattered. The woman found the others like her. The ones who had worked in the shadows, resisting not just with weapons but with ideas. They rebuilt quietly not to restore what was but to start something better. Something that couldn't be flattened into a single truth. One night, the boy stood outside what used to be a city and looked up at the stars. The bridge was gone. But the light was still there. Not pulsing. Just shining. And for the first time in his life, it felt like the sky belonged to him. He didn't know what would come next. Nobody did. But that was the point. Humanity wasn't one mind. It never was. And that was its greatest strength. It could fight, and break, and rebuild, and fall in love with things it couldn't explain. It could survive the end of the world and then wake up the next morning and wonder what was for breakfast. And that, more than anything else, was what the merge could never understand. Not everything had to make sense. Some things were just human. And they always would be.